If you saw a jet fly just 200 feet over your head today, would you even bother to look up? If you live by an airport, you wouldn't even think twice. Why is it then that when a blimp flies overhead, we all look up? To understand that, we have to go back to the beginning.
From the very beginning, airships were an awesome sight. The golden era of the airship began in the 1920s with huge vessels sometimes more than 800 feet long. The Germans made airship travel glamorous with their Zeppelins that made transatlantic crossings to the United States. The U.S. Navy had a strong interest in the uses of airships as military weapons. Some were used as submarine scouts and were even equipped with torpedoes. These giants of the skies were not without their limitations. Their lighter-than-air design made them at the mercy of the winds. In the 1930s, a U.S. naval airship got blown up on its nose from the wind and crashed back down violently, damaging its tail. More infamous, of course, was the Hindenburg disaster in New Jersey in 1937. When images of the enormous fireball reached the public, it destroyed all confidence in airships and effectively ended the era of the blimp. Or did it? Since the 1920s, Goodyear has been using blimps as flying advertisements. As the decades went on, the blimp changed little. Currently, there are 3 Goodyear blimps in service in Ohio, Florida, and Southern California.
Although the technology is nearly a century old, refinements have been made to solve the problems that plagued airships in the past. It is the job of air and frame mechanics like Tony to keep a close watch on the blimp.
Right now you can see the ship's kind of moving around. It goes 360 degrees around the pole. It goes, so go 180 up on its nose. And the reason for that is we want to keep it into the wind. We want it structured. Like I said, there's no structure in the balloon, in the blimp, so it has to go where the wind wants to go. You don't want to tie it down. It's not a rigid airship.
Sometimes strong, burly men try to lift the blimp, but in fact, it is lighter than air.
Let's see, the blimp probably weighs probably 50 pounds right now.
Just flick with your finger. That's why they call it a blimp, because the sounds it makes.
So when the helium starts to shrink, airbags automatically fill up. You got an airbag in the front, an airbag in the aft, and that's called ballonets. So when the helium starts to shrink, those airbags automatically fill up, and that's what that fan is for. Now when the sun comes out in the morning, it'll generate that helium and expand that helium. Those airbags automatically push down. We have valves on the bottom of the belly here that are specially designed at a certain pressure to open up at a certain pressure. The blimp is 192 feet long, 65 feet high. It's made out of a Dicron polyester fabric, double woven, so it doesn't rip very easily. It's very hard to rip.
To get some perspective on that, the Goodyear blimp is roughly the length of a 747 and has a height of a 747 to the top of its tail. But obviously the similarities end there. The cabin of the blimp seats just 5 people and 1 pilot.
The elevator.
The cockpit is similar to that of a twin-engine propeller aircraft.
Back goes up, forward, goes down. The engine instruments on the right, navigation are on the left. All the handles on your left side over there are throttles and a mixture of clock controls. The fuel monitoring station just below the mirror. They got fuel gauges and
blimp pilots are an elite group. There are fewer blimp pilots than astronauts, and competitions for positions is intense.
I started off flying small airplanes out of Chicago, and I was a flight instructor for a while, but I saw a blimp one day and it kind of occurred to me that it might be fun to do. There was a spot open at Goodyear, so I kind of jumped at it because this is the best spot to be if you're a blimp pilot.
Those new to airships may find it odd that there is no yoke or stick. Instead, there is a single wheel to the right-hand side of the pilot.
But this has a wheel to control our elevator instead of a yoke like an airplane, because we have such a huge elevator compared to, like, there's so much airflow going over this huge surface. Like, all other airplanes are pretty much hydraulically assisted when they're that in there. So the same work I could do with like a elevator or a yoke, it makes this a lot easier to use the wheel. And then I have rudders on the ground to turn right and left, just like a boat turns in the water.
Blimp operations require more than a dozen crew members just to get it off the ground.
And the reason for that, you got 3 guys on each nose line here, and actually they stay in a 90 degree, like exactly like right where we're standing at, and they hold that nose line and they stop the ship from shifting left and right. And then you got 6 guys around the car there that hold it from going forward and aft. Now when the ship starts to shift and it starts moving that direction, ground crewman that's in the middle there, he's going to give a sign out, a check sign. Those guys are going to hold it. They're going to try and stop it from shifting that direction. Now the guys on the car are going to pull the car because, of course, the top heavy is going to tilt a little bit, so you got to pull it back underneath.
Even over crowded LA freeways, the Blimp doesn't get anywhere fast. In a headwind, it travels at barely 11 knots. However, in a tailwind, it can cruise at speeds up to 35 knots. Its advanced light show system can be programmed into a computer and is shown on the side of a Blimp. The graphics are even good enough these days to project video. When on site at a game, all the passenger seats are removed and a large video camera is put in its place. All blimps must eventually return to the Earth. Landing the Blimp may be the most challenging aspect of its operation, requiring the skills of not only the pilot, but dozens of ground
You
crew.
gotta get it really slow because you have 12 guys out there catching you each time you come into land. So you're kind of worried about the Blimp, but you're also worried about the people on the ground. So you're really careful. It's gotta be perfect each time. If it's not, you just gotta go around and try it again.
Crew members grab the tow lines and hold it into place as another successful flight comes to an end. Although the technology of the Goodyear Blimp is as old as aviation itself, it is the uniqueness of its shape and dedication of its crews that will enable the Goodyear Blimp to fly well into the 21st century and beyond.